everybody, and Biden is the worst president in the history of this country.
So I'm running against Donald Trump, and I'm not going to talk about an obituary just because y'all think we have to talk about it.
Donald Trump and Nikki Haley have made their case to voters of New Hampshire, and now the waiting games begin. Thank you for joining us this hour for America's Vote 2024, the New Hampshire primaries. I'm back this hour with Kevin Cirilli. Kevin, thanks for joining us.
Here we go. Yep.
And we're also being joined by current Vice Chair at Prime Policy Group and former Republican Member of Congress, Tom Reed, and Democratic strategist, Amisha Cross.
All right, before we get into this, Trump and Haley, they've been trading jabs, Michael, back and forth, especially. Nonstop. It's really intensified. And Tom, I want to get your reaction on the other side of this. Take a listen to Nikki Haley earlier today. Here she is.
Do you want two 80-year-olds running for president? I mean, seriously.
So, Tom, I mean, how's that going to play with fiscally conservative independents?
Well, you know, I think what Nikki is trying to tap into is that frustration of American across all the country that are just frustrated that we're actually having to choose between a Trump-Biden rematch. Out of 300+ million people, is this the best individuals that we can put up? But from a Republican perspective, that's the lane that she's chosen to run in, and we'll see how she does the rest of this evening. But Trump is obviously being classic Trump, trying to scare people, throw lobs, and he's very good at getting people motivated because of that fear, intimidation type of factor he brings to the race.
And now, Amisha, there was an ABC News exit poll a little while ago that found that 8% of voters in today's Republican primary were, get this, Democrats. So why are Democrats voting in the GOP primary? I mean, Trump is accusing them of meddling against him. What do you make of this?
I mean, 8% is a very small number, and New Hampshire is an open primary. We know that there are a lot of moderate voters, and there are a lot of voters across the state who actually did vote for Joe Biden 4 years ago, who down ballot in the state have also voted for Republicans. So I think that that's a very different electorate than what we generally see and have seen. And this is the only state in the primaries for Republicans that actually appears this way. But it's not unheard of, and this isn't the first time. It happens in every Republican nominating base in New Hampshire. So
Amisha, I gotta press back on this. It's double the record, which was 4% back in 2012. It's double the record. It's a record number of turnout of Democrats who have voted in this.
Turnout is higher this race because I think that there are several people who assumed that after Iowa, there would have been a more competitive race, and it quite frankly was not. So we're seeing turnout rates become higher, but part of that is because Nikki Haley has been stomping the pavement very hard in New Hampshire, and she's really turned out the vote.
Tom, I want to look at another one of these exit polls. 50% of GOP primary voters in New Hampshire said Trump would still be fit for president if convicted. 47% said he wouldn't. Now, that's down from Iowa, I will note, where 64% of Iowans said he would still be fit for office. Still a fascinating number. I mean, that being said, if even a conviction is not going to turn off these Republican voters, can anything stop Trump at this point?
You know, I think it's going to be very difficult to do that. I think the writing's on the wall. These numbers are confirming to me what I think is going to be our outcome, which is that President Trump will get a rematch against President Biden. But I have to emphasize that 8% number that you saw the Democrats turning out here. To me, that's telling. It tells you that you have very fundamentally flawed candidates that we're presenting to the American people, that the American people are looking for a home, are looking to be inspired again. And I hope, as we go into this general election process, as we go through this nomination process and bring it to a conclusion, that we can start inspiring people, bring people together. I firmly believe that's what most Americans want. And I'm looking at the turnout numbers very close this evening later as to see, that silent majority that's not engaging in the electorate. That is going to be something that we got to keep an eye on as a nation for our long-term stability.
And Tom, I just got to interrupt you. The Decision Desk HQ now reporting that Trump has won the state of New Hampshire. Again, according to the Decision Desk HQ, the race has been called for the New Hampshire primary. Former President Donald Trump has won the New Hampshire primary, been declared the winner there, projected winner by Decision Desk HQ. Again, according to Decision Desk HQ, former President Donald Trump, the projected winner of New Hampshire. This comes after his winning the Iowa caucus. Now, obviously, Michael Schnell, the margin of victory is going to be carefully watched. Nikki Haley has said that she will stay in this race regardless of the outcome. But if he wins by double digits, this is not the night that Nikki Haley wanted to be having. This is not the night, the upset that her campaign had happened. For Trump, this is what he had wanted. And for this to be called just 4 minutes after final polls closing in the Granite State is quite telling. And so the coalition for Trump in the Granite State, they've now voted for him in 2 open Republican primaries back in 2016 as well as in 2024. The race for Haley becomes significantly harder. The race for Trump and the path for Trump to reach 1,215 delegates, he's on that pace ahead of the March 5th Super Tuesday caucuses and primaries, when so many of the majority of the delegates are going to be awarded. This is a big night, Michael Schnell, for Donald Trump.
Yeah, a huge night for Donald Trump, and depending on how the margin shakes out, not a great night for Nikki Haley. Remember, this was sort of a make or break evening for her. This was the state where she was faring the best. She was the strongest in the polls against the former president. A lot of that due to the fact that we have those unregistered individuals voting, more of those moderate and independent voters.
I want to bring back in now former Republican Congressman Tom Reed, who joins us virtually. Tom, you've mentioned that the majority of Americans do not want to see a rematch between former President Trump and President Biden. You've started here in the Beltway the Committee for American Majority. You're trying to make a direct appeal to moderates. There's this open-ended question, Tom, as to whether or not there will be some type of other entity that emerges when you've got 70%, according to the latest Gallup poll, that doesn't want a Biden-Trump rematch. So is this the alternative going to emerge?
I hope so, but I think the foregone conclusion is that Trump is on his way to being the presidential nominee for the Republican Party this presidential cycle. But we can't discount those voices, those millions of voices, and that's why our Committee of the American Majority, working with Larry Hogan, we've started this political action, non-for-profit, that we're trying to listen to that voice and create a culture where we can talk with each other again. And I think that's a long-term takeaway from this presidential cycle that we're going to have to focus on, is how do we start listening to the American people that are just throwing their hands up saying, why can't we do better than these candidates? But in the meantime, the show continues.
You're watching now live pictures from Manchester, New Hampshire, where we are awaiting Donald Trump to make his victory speech. Again, Decision Desk HQ projecting that former President Trump will, in fact, be the Republican winner of the New Hampshire primary. Amisha Cross, Democratic strategist, it now looks like, I mean, I don't want to get ahead of Super Tuesday or the South Carolina primary, but it's looking increasingly likely, Amisha, that this is going to be another Biden-Trump rematch.
Well, I don't think it ever looked any other way. Donald Trump ran as essentially an incumbent the entire time. He strong-armed everybody. And Nikki Haley, much to her own chagrin, I think got a little bit too hard and a little bit too flexing towards the end. She should have been doing this from the beginning. Donald Trump is the Republican stronghold. He is the standard bearer for that party. And regardless of how many Republicans are in the whispers saying that they would like to have someone else, when the rubber meets the road and they actually go into those voting booths, they check the box for Donald Trump over and over and over again.
And Amisha, I want to ask, because, you know, obviously the Biden campaign and the Biden team, the White House, absolutely no fan of the former president. But we've seen the polls that have showed that Nikki Haley would fare better against President Biden compared to Donald Trump. Some of those polls showing Nikki Haley beating Biden by a wide margin. In some cases, Trump doesn't beat Biden. In other cases, it's neck and neck. So do you think that the Biden campaign is breathing a small sigh of relief tonight because it looks like Donald Trump is on his way to locking up this nomination? And, you know, they've said they would be okay with a rematch. They beat him once. They're confident in their chances again.
Look, the Biden campaign has already ran against Donald Trump and won. They also recognize that Donald Trump's, the base voters have not grown for Donald Trump. He has a base that does not largely include moderates, undecided voters, people of color, specifically Black people, younger voters. That is something that I do think could have been a little bit peeled off by a Nikki Haley candidacy. But clearly the Republican voters themselves didn't want to see that happen. So they're willing to throw up another loss. And quite frankly, their loss is Democrats' gain.
And so, again, for former President Trump to be the projected winner of the New Hampshire primary, now 2-0, Michael Schnell, winning Iowa dominantly, record-breaking turnout, record-breaking margin in Iowa caucus, beating Nikki Haley in the suburban vote around suburban Des Moines. He's the projected winner in New Hampshire. The Haley campaign's argument was that she would rather be able to turn out Republicans who were disenfranchised with Trump. Well, now that didn't hold true a second time. Right. It comes on the night, mind you, when Pentagon officials are saying that the U.S. military has struck 3 sites in Iraq that are backed by Hezbollah. Clearly geopolitics on the minds of voters and the different path forward for the nation. Nikki Haley had offered a much more alliance-based approach. Trump's message on foreign policy has been more isolationist. Right. And so, Tom Reed, I'll bring it back to you here. As now this enters further into the election cycle and the path forward emerges, what specifics now are, you've worked with former President Trump in Congress, you've worked with Democrats. I mean, what is the conversation right now at the Republican National Committee about coalescing behind Trump tonight?
Yeah, I'll tell you, we're going to have to take a deep breath after tonight and figure this out, because there's still a faction of the party that just cannot believe we're in this situation with Trump rerunning against Biden. But if I was in Biden camp, I look at these numbers and I see what's going on the Democratic side and trying to look at it objectively. He's a very flawed candidate. He's very weak. And so I just hope the advisors of these individuals start tapping into that positive energy that the American people are dying for. They don't want to be inflamed with fear, fashion, or anger. You know, they want to be inspired to let America be stable and a beacon of hope around the world. And that's what I think the big takeaway I take away from this is Haley's voters are still going to be there. I think it's going to be difficult for them to come home. But at the same time, Biden is pushing people away just because he's one of the most fundamentally flawed Democratic candidates I've seen in a long time.
And I mean, Tom, look, we talk about the potential of Republicans coalescing around the former president. It doesn't look like Nikki Haley has that in mind. She was saying before polls closed today that she's not going anywhere. Her campaign put out that memo saying, everyone take a deep breath. I'm not going anywhere. She has a $4 million ad buy starting tomorrow. She's shown no signs of being done with this race. But look, tonight is not a good sign for her, this being called within 4 minutes. Of course, it's going to depend on the margin. But I mean, as being a politician yourself, do you think that Nikki Haley can make the plea to voters? I mean, this is also something Kevin and I spoke about before, telling donors that she deserves more money and deserves to continue to be in this race when she's falling pretty far short of first place in a state where she was positioned to do the best.
It's a fair point, but I think she obviously is carrying a voice of the Republican Party that needs to be listened to. And the worst thing that could happen is that she immediately drops out and we turn our back on those Republican voters. We need it to win in 2024. We're going to need them to come home. And my hope is that we can inspire them to come home, not scare them. And Joe Biden, at the end of the day, I hope starts stepping up and becomes more of a leader than what I've seen demonstrated today.
Michael Schnell, just looking at the quick analysis, I mean, here we are on New Hampshire primary night. We were covering the Iowa caucus just the other week, and so the path forward for there to be some type of an upset, some type of a message being sent from New Hampshire, right? Nikki Haley, in her own words, said Iowa makes a decision, and then New Hampshire corrects that decision. Well, Iowa and New Hampshire have spoken, and they backed Donald Trump. And so when you look at that analysis, based historically on where Republican voters and Republican New Hampshire primary voters have went. 2000, they went for Senator John McCain. They then previously backed Mitt Romney. We've seen that reversal on the Democratic side, where in 2012 they backed the Democrats picked Hillary Clinton. In 2016, they picked Bernie Sanders. Right. But in 2016 and 2024, New Hampshire Republicans chose Donald Trump. Yeah. They showed up for Donald Trump. They're sending a message. And so that message, I'm curious from your reporting, is often quite different than quite frankly, the conversations that we're having here in Washington, D.C. in the halls of Congress. And they would argue is out of touch when Republicans in the Senate are punting once again some type of deal to be made on something like the border.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this shows that the Republican Party is behind the former president. Look, Tom points out that there is a contingent of the Republican Party that's behind someone other than Trump, but it's not strong enough. And it's clearly not the majority of the party. I mean, look, this was Nikki Haley's best chance. This was where she was positioned the best in the polls. She had the best opportunity given those moderate and independent voters. If she couldn't do it here, I think it's pretty clear that the party wants Trump.
We also have some other breaking news. President Biden, Amisha Cross, has won the New Hampshire primary. I mean, Amisha, I would be remiss not to mention there was a little bit of drama behind the scenes as to whether or not he'd be able to have that write-in campaign and to become the winner. I think Marianne Williamson was running and some others. But
what's an election day without drama?
What's yeah, right? But Amisha Cross, I mean, that's a sign of strength in many ways that the president was able to get that together and win the New Hampshire primary.
It is a sign of strength. You know, write-in candidates and write-in campaigns are extremely difficult. Everyone knows that. But I do think that Dean Phillips is a ridiculous candidate first and foremost. But also, again, New Hampshire is a lot of undecideds. It's a lot of moderates. It's a lot of people who split the ticket in voting. And I do think that Joe Biden's name still has resonating power in multiple places across this country, particularly where you're seeing a lot more moderate voters.
Well, and do you think that it also kind of prevented the inevitable conversation should he have not been able to mobilize that operation? It shows organization, number one, that he was able to do it. But secondly, it also prevents a bad news cycle, to be blunt with you, here in Washington, D.C., where the headlines would have been, can't even win, a Democratic primary. Does it not? I mean, just calling it like it is a little bit.
I mean, it's a write-in candidacy. It wasn't going to be make or break for the Biden campaign. Their full recognition that the reason why we changed the primary calendar from the DNC was specifically to go to places that are more diverse, that are more representative of the American populace and more representative of Democratic voters. So that's why South Carolina, that's why Georgia have been moved up. That's why Iowa is no longer even in consideration.
So, Tom, it's really interesting, though, because those independent voters, the same voters at RFK, for example, that his super PAC has mobilized. And for RFK, it's that streak of that libertarian almost in New Hampshire, live free or die state, that are deciding between, in 2016, between Trump and Bernie Sanders. And in 2024, one could argue, are deciding not just between Trump and Biden, but really Trump and RFK. No?
I think it's a great point. And I think the concerning part that I see is that we're just not listening to the American voters that are not the primary electorate. We're not listening to the rest of the Americans, and that's what RFK was representing. He was trying to bring people together, and it's going to be concerning, but it's the reality of the situation. And Trump's going to be looking like a good night tonight, and we'll see where it goes. But I applaud Nikki Haley for standing for principle, and trying to bring her best to the fight.
Tom, there was something I wanted to ask you. There was an interesting exit poll from CNN before the polls closed tonight, and essentially among Haley's supporters, it found that 11% would be satisfied with the former president winning the nomination, 88% would be unsatisfied. Asking you from a Republican point of view, when you talk about those 88% of voters being unsatisfied, do you believe that those are people who at the end of the day will be able to get behind nominee Trump, worrying about having Republicans in office despite their reservations and misgivings about him? Or do you think that there could be some of these Nikki Haley supporters who could maybe do a write-in candidate or do an independent? There's this talk still about no labels, maybe support the president, because it's going to be those voters that are going to be make or break for him when he goes up against President Biden. It's going to be all about coalescing the party. But if we're seeing 88% who would be unsatisfied, I mean, from your vantage point, from your standpoint, do you think these are folks who can ultimately get behind the former president, or is he going to have a math problem in the general?
I think there's going to be a problem that they're going to have to recognize, and that's why I hope he starts embracing people and not scaring them away. But at the end of the day, this also is a problem for Biden, because if you have that type of number, Biden's weakness, and as he gets closer in the polls when this becomes a head-to-head, that's going to be very troublesome for the Biden folks. And my hope is that the people start recognizing that we are in a very difficult time as a country, and they need to get engaged. The worst thing they can do is disengage and not vote. That's when democracies die. And that's why they're going to demand that these leaders answer their voice. And that's what I'm trying to be part of as I go forward on my political activity on the side.
You know, Michael Schnall, I know you have a question for Amisha, but to your point with No Labels, I'm going to be interviewing Joe Cunningham, who's the director of No Labels, tomorrow. And the question that everyone wants to know is, are they going to expand ballot access to more states? They're in 18 states now, and clearly they're going to be a factor. They've said that they're going to announce whether or not they're going to run a unity ticket, as they're describing it, sometime in March. If that happens before or after Super Tuesday, we don't know. They haven't said. They're going to have to show a little leg at some point in terms of what they're going to do. They have to, because, I mean, people need to plan, people need to understand what exactly, and more importantly, the voters need to know. I want to dip live in now to Nikki Haley in New Hampshire for her remarks. Here she is.
Thank you, New Hampshire, for the love, the kindness, the support, and a great night here tonight. Thank you so much. I want to first say thank you to my husband, who I know is watching right now. I love you. We're excited to have you. Thank you. I want to thank my kids who are here, Rena and Naylan and Josh, who have really kind of stepped up and just given me the support I need. You know, you really pull on your family when something like this happens, and I am incredibly blessed by their support. I have my parents at home, and I will always say that the way they raised me, to know that we lived in the best country in the world, but to also know that the best way you appreciate your blessings is to give back. Thank you, Mom and Dad. I love you so much. To my siblings, to my in-laws, to everybody back at home, to Vicki for helping me take care of Mom and Dad. Thank you for that. You know, I will tell you, it feels like it's been a lifetime, but it has been almost a year that we've been campaigning in New Hampshire, touching every hand, answering every question, being the last person to leave. And we had the most amazing thing happen is the second that we got the endorsement from Governor Chris Sununu. I mean, a true governor that doesn't stand behind a podium. He shows up at a diner. He shows up at the brewery. He loves the people of New Hampshire. He has been with me every single day at every single event. Chris, I couldn't have done it without you. And I want to thank someone who was with me on day one. He's a patriot. He's a hardcore conservative. And he is my friend, General Don Bolduc. And Sharon, thank you so, so much. I want to congratulate Donald Trump on his victory tonight. He earned it, and I want to acknowledge that. Now, you've all heard the chatter among the political class. They're falling all over themselves, saying this race is over. Well, I have news for all of them. New Hampshire is first in the nation. It is not the last in the nation. This race is far from over. There are dozens of states left to go. And the next one is my sweet state of South Carolina. At one point in this campaign, there were 14 of us running. And we were at 2% in the polls. Well, I'm a fighter. And I'm scrappy. And now we're the last one standing next to Donald Trump. And today we got close to half of the vote. We still have a ways to go, but we keep moving up. lot of people, politics is way too personal. It's not personal for me. I voted for Trump twice. I was proud to serve America in his cabinet. I agree with many of his policies. I decided to run because I'm worried about the future of our country and because it's time to put the negativity and chaos behind us. We have an economy that's crushing middle-class Americans. We have a border that is totally open and dangerous, creating a disaster in our country.
Unbelievable!
We have schools that are failing too many of our children, and we have a world on fire with a war in Europe and the Middle East and a huge and growing threat from China. And then you look at Washington, D.C. We have a Congress that fights about everything and accomplishes nothing. And we have Joe Biden in the White House making one bad decision after another, when he's making any decisions at all. Our country's in a real mess.
We need an accountant.
And the question is, who's going to fix it? With Donald Trump, Republicans have lost almost every competitive election. We lost the Senate. We lost the House. We lost the White House. We lost in 2018. We lost in 2020. And we lost in 2022. The worst kept secret in politics is how badly the Democrats want to run against Donald Trump.
Trump's a loser. He's a loser.
They know Trump is the only Republican in the country who Joe Biden can defeat. You can't fix the mess if you don't win an election.
We want to win.
A Trump nomination is a Biden win and a Kamala Harris presidency.
Dump Trump.
I defeat Biden handily.
We want you, Nikki.
With Donald Trump, you have one bout of chaos after another. This court case, that controversy, this tweet, that senior moment. You can't fix Joe Biden's chaos with Republican chaos. The other day, Donald Trump accused me of not providing security at the Capitol on January 6th. Now, I've long called for mental competency tests for politicians over the age of 75. Trump claims he'd do better than me in one of those tests. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. But if he thinks that, then he should have no problem standing on a debate stage with me. Most Americans do not want a rematch between Biden and Trump. The first party to retire its 80-year-old candidate is going to be the party that wins this election. And I think it should be the Republicans that win this election. So our fight is not over because we have a country to save. In the next 2 months, millions of voters in over 20 states will have their say. We should honor them and allow them to vote. And guess what? In the next 2 months, Joe Biden isn't going to get any younger or any better. We'll have all the time we need to defeat Joe Biden. When we get to South Carolina, Donald Trump's going to have a harder time falsely attacking me. The great people of South Carolina know I cut their taxes. They know I signed the toughest illegal immigration bill in the country. They know we passed voter ID and tort reform and ethics reform. And they know we moved 35,000 people from welfare to work. Every time I've run for office in South Carolina, I've beaten the political establishment. They're lined up against me again. That's no surprise. But South Carolina voters don't want a coronation. They want an election. And we're going to give them one. Because we are just getting started. Thank you for the energy.
You've been watching Nikki Haley delivering her remarks live from Concord, New Hampshire. I'm Kevin Cirilli with The Hill, joined by my colleague, The Hill's Michael Schnell, and of course, Democratic strategist Misha Cross and former Republican Congressman Tom Reed. Haley said that, quote, a Biden win and a Kamala Harris presidency is what that would mean should Trump go up against Biden. She said that the worst kept secret in Washington is that Democrats want a rematch against Trump. She tried to lure the former president to a debate, which Trump has not participated in. And she also tried to reframe the parameters of the debate, justifying her ability to keep her campaign moving forward, saying that she is the outsider to challenge the status quo and the establishment of the Republican Party. She noted the South Carolina primary. She, of course, is the former governor of the Palmetto State, where this race is headed now in the coming weeks. She noted that Super Tuesday is happening in just about 2 months, with 20 more states going to happen. She said that she fully intends to stay in the race, that Republicans deserve to make their voices known. And she said that the candidate the party that retires, the 80-year-old candidate first, will win this election. Yeah. That said, she still lost tonight.
Yeah, and she said that we still have a ways to go, but we're moving up. So right there, no indication that Nikki Haley has any plans of dropping out of this race. She is intent on staying in it, even though, of course, she lost tonight in New Hampshire, is projected to lose, rather, which was a key state for her. Tom Reed, I want you to bring into this conversation, what did you make of Nikki Haley's remarks right there? And no, she didn't sound deflated at all. She didn't sound like she lost. She sounded like she's encouraged to move on to the next race, and she has this optimism. But as we've said countless times, New Hampshire was her best shot. It was her best standing in the state, and she lost. So what do you make of these comments and her decision to move forward?
Well, I respect her, and I respect that energy, and I respect what she's trying to tap into, and that's that voice that's not being listened to in the Republican Party as well as the nation as a whole. But she is going to have an uphill battle. As an objective observer looking at this, it's going to be difficult to overcome this Trump voter base that's putting Trump through the primary election process. That being said, she could potentially be helpful in the sense of hopefully getting Trump to start embracing these folks, be more inclusive as opposed to scare people and become, that lightning rod that he is. But let's see what happens. But I applaud her effort, and well done tonight in regards to her speech.
Misha Cross, does President Biden want a rematch with Donald Trump? And is he afraid to face Nikki Haley, as we just heard from Nikki Haley?
I don't think President Biden's afraid of anyone. However, I do think that there is polling that suggests, and obviously internal conversations about a rematch with former President Trump. At the end of the day, I think anybody wants to match with somebody who they already beat handedly before. And acknowledging that, again, Trump's base, the base of the Republican Party, has not grown. The majority of this country is moderate. The majority of this country is diverse. Black voters matter. Younger voters matter. Those people are not in alignment with the Republican Party nor Donald Trump. And I think that those things are the things that he's looking that we are looking at, that the Democratic Party is looking at as it continues on throughout the campaign cycle. But I do think that she hit on something that was very interesting here, Nikki Haley, when she basically said that a vote for Trump is essentially a vote for Biden and a vote for Kamala Harris. For whatever reason, Republicans love to take digs at Kamala Harris. If this is an age thing, both Joe Biden as well as Donald Trump are, super seniors at this point, and whomever Donald Trump chooses as his running mate would also be within a heartbeat away from the presidency. So I do think that there's something to be said here about the consistent attacks on Kamala Harris, who, by the way, is not at the top of the ticket. Whoever wins for the Republican nomination is running against the Joseph Robinette Biden.
See, I thought that was an audition almost for her to be Trump's running mate, which she has refused to say whether or not she would decline an opportunity. I thought she was trying to illustrate the contrast to Trump world, but I hear you, Misha, on that. But the lore will continue as to what Nikki Haley will do next, but what she's definitely not going to do is drop out of the race. I want to thank Amisha Cross, our Democratic strategist, and of course Tom Reed, former Republican congressman, for joining us tonight as, again, the Decision Desk HQ projecting former President Donald Trump is the winner of the New Hampshire primary. And that does it for me. I'm Kevin Cirilli, joined by my colleague Michael Schnell. Thank you for watching us on America's Vote 2024.